Yeah, if your salespeople were hunting dogs, your eye would be a golden retriever. They're just wagging their tail, and they want to be loved, and you scratch them behind the ear, and you can motivate them that way. A D would be more like a black lab, just very direct, bark in German, that kind of thing.
Welcome to the Small Business Safari, where I help guide you to avoid those traps, pitfalls, and dangers that lurk when navigating the wild world of small business ownership. I'll share those gold nuggets of information and invite guests to help accelerate your ascent to that mountaintop of success. It's a jungle out there, and I want to help you traverse through the levels of owning your own business that can get you bogged down and distract you from hitting your own personal and professional goals. So strap in, adventure team, and let's take a ride through the safari and get you to the mountaintop. Cheers. Cheers. We are coming to the end of season 1.
Say it ain't so, Chris.
I'm going to have to say it so, people. I think we have another place to go. But before we leave, we want to talk about some other stuff that you and I were talking about before we got started on saying, okay, we're going to bring in interview guests for season 2. And we'd also opened up our mailbag. And our mailbag has gotten a few hits since we've started.
Well, good.
We've been at this for a couple months, and guess what? We've got 1,000 downloads going. I know everybody's pumped up about that, and it's going to keep on going. I swear I've talked to everybody who's ever listened to this thing, but I got some great feedback. They said on one of the episodes we talked about hiring and we talked about retaining employees, and you talk about that, but how do you know you've got a great employee if you can't really interview the way you were trained with behavioral interviewing and all that other stuff? And you and I started talking about this, and we wanted to get into which tool do you use? And so there's a couple out there, right?
Or do you use a tool?
Yeah. So I am familiar with the DISC profile. I am also familiar with Myers-Briggs. I have not used Enneagram. And before I got into small business, I got Sperdutoed, which we'll talk about later. It's not anything else that anybody wants to know about.
A couple shots of penicillin took care of that.
Whew. So
these assessment, they're really behavioral. People call them personality profiles, but they're really behavioral. They kind of have crazy starts to them.
So what do you mean by that?
So I always want to say Briggs and Stratton, which is hilarious. 'Cause I never did use Myers-Briggs, but Myers-Briggs was started by a woman. She must have been a psychologist who was pretty weirded out that of the attraction between her daughter and her fiance. Like they were a total mismatch.
That's how Myers-Briggs started?
That's how Myers-Briggs started.
So it shows you know more about this than I do.
DISC, the guy who started DISC, guess what else he invented?
I have no idea.
You won't. The lie detector test.
No way.
And
the DISC profile came from lie detector tests?
I don't know if they had anything to do with each other, but wait till I tell you what he invented next. You'll never guess this. He created Wonder Woman.
No way.
Yeah, so the guy that invented the DISC test, or not, he didn't invent the DISC test. The DISC theory, DISC test was invented like 30 years later, is the same guy who invented the lie detector test and created Wonder Woman, which makes me think, I don't think he really liked his wife. or trusted his wife.
I wonder why I'm drawn to the DISC profile now. I just don't know.
I don't know.
I just don't know.
Yeah, but this goes all the way back to the Greeks. They had the 4 humors, the earth, water, air, fire. I mean, so this 4 quadrants of behavior goes back centuries. Yeah, I know.
You are really into this. You're way better at this.
I never was certified in it, but I'm a big believer in it. I mean, the first time I took the test, I couldn't believe how accurate it was on me.
Right.
And I have seen its value in business over and over and over again. And so when it came to the point where I was bringing on new franchisees in a franchise system, we went through DISC profiling.
So let's get into that. I think one of the so I know DISC the best. We'll talk about my corporate world later. I can't speak really qualified on any of the other ones right now, but DISC is something I use in my business as well. You used it. I've actually went out there and looked and searched on podcasts for DISC profile experts. Couldn't find them. Maybe I didn't search wide enough, but I think this episode might qualify for one I would have found. So why don't you tell us how you think disc works, or how you used it, and what you know about it, so we can explain it to the audience. And then I'll dig in and tell you how I used it, because I don't know near as much as you on this.
No, I don't know. Well, it'll be interesting to find out today. And you and I bet you we're going to differ on, do you use it to hire?
I do not.
Okay, good. We agree there.
Okay.
And a lot of people use it to hire. Some big companies get in trouble using it to hire. I think it is a great tool the knowledge of DISC is great when it comes to, once you've hired somebody, how do you best manage them? How do you train them? How do you motivate them? And when you're working on your org chart and your succession planning, it's going to factor into that. The other thing is when it comes to your customer profiling. And when you're...
I'm smiling like a Cheshire cat
yes,
right now.
You are. So if you teach a little bit to your salespeople, because everybody just sort of assumes that the way they like to hear things is the way everybody likes to hear things.
Exactly.
And the one thing I used to teach, and I'm assuming you're going to agree with this, and we should probably break down what DISC stands for, but odds are an entrepreneur is a D, a driver, a dominant. It could be an I, sometimes a C, but it's, I would say, I don't know, don't quote me, 75%, 80% of the time it's a D.
I would agree with that. I think, but before we go too far with that, I do know that one of the things I have learned in my business as I use DISC as a communication tool, as a sales tool, and allowing people to work, I really think it's a very heady topic for a lot of people. So I do think we need to take a minute and lay that out for everybody.
All right.
So what is a D? So what the DISC profile says is, we want you to go through these questions. We're going to ask you a series of questions, go through them quickly, answer from your gut, and if you answer them truly with your gut, it's going to give you a mirror back to yourself, letting you know what you're like as a natural person, just having a beer with a buddy, and what you're like under stress or under an adapted style. And so when you have that, they say that you're going to be in one of four quadrants. You're going to be a D, an I, an S, or a C. So you brought out the D already. So describe that D.
The D is, and you hear a couple of words for it, but it's a driver, it's a dominant. So it's your alpha.
Extroverted, outgoing. I always say, like Norman Schwarzkopf, back in Desert Storm is what he ran. He was a high D.
Yeah.
He was a dominant, he was a driver. So now the next one, extroverted person is an I. What's an I?
It's a person that wants to be the life of the party. They want to be liked, maybe more than wanting to be right.
Right.
There's a lot of little nuances.
He's the guy at the party we call Gary Go-Go, right? He comes up and if we're at a networking event, he's the guy who comes out, business cards flying out of his, and he's trying to meet everybody there, wants to make sure everybody likes him, and is inviting everybody back to his house to watch the football game.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
Got to have the big party.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So on the introverted side, we have the S. What's
Right.
the S?
So the original term is submissive, but also people refer to it as an amiable person, but that doesn't start with S, so that doesn't really work. But
Right.
it's a person who doesn't want conflict. They want their nest just done just so. They want everybody to be happy. And I'd say that'd be about
So
it.
they changed the term now to steady,
Steady.
because you can't say submissive anymore, because that wouldn't be PC, and let's go into that one.
No, it's
not right now.
amazing just because it was in the old marriage vow. Now you can't use it anywhere.
Never. No, please no.
Okay.
All right. So still on the introverted side of the
Right.
scale, there's the C. What's the C?
Control. What do you call it?
We call it compliant now,
Compliant. Yeah.
but they are focused on the task,
Details.
right? They're your accountant. They're the person you want watching over your financial portfolio. They're the person you want doing your books. They are sitting there I don't need to talk to people right now. I just need to do my tasks, please.
Interesting little nugget on C's. They don't like to be touched. So if you are an I, you're the life of the party, and you like, slapping people on the back and that kind of thing, don't touch a C.
Right. So you called the amiables. So in
Yeah.
the sales process, we actually give them all names. We have Storm and Norman. We have Gary Gogo, who is our party guy, our party family. They got to have a party on their deck. I always got the lights out. They're the ones that have the fully stocked bar. They're the ones who everybody knows to gravitate to their place for the football game, or they know that Halloween's going to be the best at their place. And then we move over to the amiables, and we call them Al and Amy. And Al and Amy amiable are really nice, but they kind of don't want you in their house right now. But if you're here, they're not going to tell you they don't like it too much. And okay, can you just leave now, please? Okay, if not, okay, that's fine. And then, like you said, the compliance. That one is Linda and Lou Logical.
Right.
They are your accountants, and you've seen them. We all know them. And we think about the American Gothic picture with the pitchfork. That's the picture we put up with those guys. So laying that out for the disc profile, I actually went out to look for all of this information. We actually developed it here at the Trusted Toolbox for our Home Service Institute and helping everybody with it.
Have you heard the elevator analogy to illustrate it?
There is a great YouTube video out there about that I'm going to put back out. I'd love to claim it. And you probably need to say it. And what we're going to do is put it out on our Home Service Institute YouTube page and tag that video, because the video is how I explain it.
Yeah, I've never actually seen the video, but
it's a great
for
video.
somebody who's trying to grasp DISC and what all these people are, imagine 4 people in an elevator, one of each, 1D, 1I, 1S, 1C, and then there's a 5th person who's trying to make the elevator. The D, the driver, is going to immediately start punching the close the door button.
100 times over, like rapid fire.
That's right. The I, on the other hand, is going to grab and hold the door open and welcome him in and introduce himself. The C is probably going to look up for that little chart somewhere on the wall, wondering what the capacity of the elevator is, and start making quick assessments on the total weight, and will that person be over capacity. And then the S is just going to go, I can just take the stairs.
That's right. That's okay. Thank you. Let me out. I'll just move. I don't want anybody to be upset. I want to make sure, because I know somebody's calculating. You're inviting everybody in, and you're very upset.
And the important thing, and this is what I used to teach in franchising, because you came from the corporate world.
I did.
You're a D. You're a high D, right? But you're also high I imagine.
I am. So I am right there in the middle. I am,
Okay.
But I'm all the way over to the extroverted side. I can play the D, and I can also be the I.
So somebody who's just truly a high D, they look at the rest of these people as inferiors, just instinctively, because everybody thinks they should think like them, and they're very direct. They don't really care about your feelings. They just want to get the job done. And yet, in the corporate world, you can kind of get away with it. Not so much today in 2021, because people are just quitting.
Right.
But in general, if you don't like it, there's 3 people behind you that want your job. So this is what I want done. Boom, boom, boom. And you just, you bark out a lot of orders and you're done with it. But when you become an entrepreneur, you've got your first hire, and it might be a salesperson. And then maybe you need somebody to answer the phones. And then finally you need somebody to keep the books, because you're growing and you can't do everything. It's one of each. And if you act like you did in the corporate world in a small little office, you'll be hiring front desk people over and over and over again. You'll be hiring it. You can become a bull in a china shop real quick.
So, wow, we didn't even talk about this before we got started on this episode. This reminds me of Enron, the smartest guys in the room. Enron hired all Ds. Enron hired people who were just like them. And what you just said basically is, as a small business owner, if you hire everybody like you, you will fail. And if you hire everybody not like you and you try to act like they're all supposed to be like you, you will fail. And so that's the biggest part that you have to learn, is that we're all in a quadrant. And some of us might straddle a quadrant here or there, especially in our natural style. But you have to realize that 3/4 of the world is not like you.
Is not like you. And actually, the percentages are even more skewed. There's a lot fewer Ds than there are S's. So it's not 25, 25, 25.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah. So the fact is if you hired all Ds, you'd just be like a pit of vipers.
It was the Enron.
Yeah.
That was the fall of Enron. They were all vipers. They were supposed to be accountants. They were supposed to be detailed. They were supposed to be some steady, not submissive. But they didn't do that. They hired wrong. So do I use DISC to help hire? And the answer I said was no. But to go back to it, just to lay the rest of the groundwork out, because I wish somebody would have had an episode like this so I could have listened to it. So when you get the report back that somebody does, and if they do it the right way, you're going to see how they are naturally at a bar or maybe hanging out, having dinner with somebody under a natural style. You're going to see how they're going to act. Then you're going to see how they're going to act under pressure. And I like to see somebody who's going to move.
Mm-hmm.
Because what I found is it doesn't help me with hiring, but it definitely helped me with basically predicting failure. Is that somebody who stays in the same quadrant? It says no matter what, under stress or in a natural world, I'm going to be the same person. You're going to fail. And that's what you basically just said about the D. If I stay D and I hire an S and a C and an I to work with me and I don't change my style, they're gone.
Well, and by the same token, so just because you're an S and you're introverted, so I'm introverted.
Yeah.
But I'm a very gregarious introvert, and I'm a very good salesperson. I don't do it in the same way an extrovert does. But if you hire an introvert who's an S and try to put them in a sales position, they're not going to do well. And I think
I'm going to stop you right there. Hang on. What do you mean an S can't be a good salesman? I don't understand why. So he's steady. He can't be a good salesman? Why?
I'm not going to say they can't be. I'm going to say statistically, if you're playing percentages, just like blackjack, I wouldn't necessarily think I would want an S in a sales position.
All right. What sales position are you hiring for?
Well, it could be outside sales. I mean, you can have an S as inside sales, maybe more the farmer rather than the hunter.
Right.
Where you have accounts and you're trying to develop them. I could see an S go there. But see, this is knowledge of the behavioral types and trying to put them in the best fit.
You just hit exactly where I was hoping you'd go.
Yeah.
So with my company, these guys get fed leads. I have plenty of leads. They have to farm those leads. A hunter as an S loses. A hunter as a D wins.
Right.
But in my case, with what we have to do is you have to go out there and you have to meet with the customer and then prepare pretty much a detailed estimate about what we're going to do. And if it's a bathroom remodel or if even just doing small home repairs, I found that some of my S's have been able to adapt and move away from their S. Can be a gregarious, outgoing person with the customer, but really, when they get back to their office and they start typing things up, they're doing the logical, detailed work that needs to happen to make it successful. On the flip side, when I send my Ds, who I thought were going to be the best salesman ever, I thought he was going to freaking kill it. Guy couldn't write up a thing to save his butt. He had the best meetings. The clients loved him, and they never got the estimate, and I had to let him go because he just wouldn't finish the task. Now, that's the intangible want to, and that's where the DISC tool is a tool that needs to be used but also understood. And again, I wish I would have heard this episode because I would have learned so much about how I could have used this thing better. I've had to learn it over using it now for going on almost 10 years I've used it.
Yeah, so if you do have a high I as your salesperson, they're going to make friends with everybody. But you will now know you need to manage them a little differently than you would a D, maybe.
Yes.
Because they're going to be terrible at details. They're probably going to tell you when it comes to the sales meeting, tell me about all your prospects. And they're just going to be painting all these wonderful stories. And you're going to have to drill down a little bit because a lot of it, it's not that they're making it up. They're just excited and extremely optimistic. And you need to actually drill down to find out, is this a real prospect? What's the next step? You're going to have to manage them a lot more carefully.
The tool of DISC is fascinating, and that's why we wanted to get this in before we started bringing in interview guests, because I didn't realize how much knowledge you had historically on it, but I have had so many learnings because I've screwed it up so many times. Thinking I should just rely on DISC, I see it on paper. It is a mirror. I say with every time I look at one, guys, I look at this as a grain of salt. Now, after 10 years, there are a lot of grains of salt I put on it. I use this to help me communicate with the guys better because my sales manager that I tried to hire a couple of years ago was a high I. He actually was me. I actually hired the same guy as me, but I have a whole wheel here in my office and I've got a full complement of the S's and C's to help. And I put him in the sales management role and all he did was tell me what I wanted to hear.
Right.
And when I said, well, where's the numbers? Guess who had to put the numbers together? And you're looking at him. The thumbs are pointing right here. I'm like, why am I putting the numbers together for you as a sales manager? Because he didn't want to worry about details. He just wanted to make sure everybody liked him.
Yep. Yeah. If your salespeople were hunting dogs, your I would be a golden retriever. They're just wagging their tail and they want to be loved, and you scratch them behind the ear, and you can motivate them that way. A D would be more like a black lab. Just very direct, bark in German. That kind of thing.
I found it's been very interesting. All right, so now we've talked about the sales thing. So in the situation where they need to be hunters, you would say a high D would be a great copier salesman, which I still think is probably the worst position in the world to be a cold calling copier salesman back in the 80s and 90s.
Oh, man.
Just think about doing that.
Yeah.
You have got to have the memory of a goldfish, and you've got to be a D.
That's what I tell my tennis partner every time he double faults. Goldfish. Be a goldfish.
7 seconds. Go 7 seconds. Let's go, goldfish. But if you have leads coming in and your high D isn't focused in on getting those details done, that's where I found, again, people on paper looked really good. So I said I'd never hired around the disc. So,
because it's expensive.
Well, it is. So I have to find the right consultant to help you with it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that expensive, but if you're everybody that you interview, if you do the disc, it's going to add up.
It does. So I have I have a guy that I use today to help me run the disc profiles, and still leaves it up to me to analyze. I'm sure there's consultants out there that will help you analyze what you're looking at. So I went to make my first scheduler hire, which I knew was going to be the hardest part in my company because I had been doing it for 3 months. I'm scheduling all my guys. I had to get back in the weeds. It's a very detailed task. And for this guy who's high D and I, it was really hard for me to do because I had to get focused in and do it. But I built a job description. I put the shingle out. I get the interviews in. I get the candidates in. I put my top 2 candidates through the disc profile. I have a disc profile consultant who has since retired, looks at him and says, you need to hire candidate B. I said, but I like candidate A more. She says, candidate A is going to give away your company. This person likes everybody, wants to make sure he's the life of the party. And as a scheduler, he's going to try to overcompensate and take care of your customers and lose money for you.
At your expense.
She says, you need to go B. Guess who this guy is? It's a she. She was my hard driving sergeant. And she, to this day, is the person who protects the profit of my company, gets my guys scheduled, helps them make more money, gets them to the spot they got to be. Because she is a high D with a lot of attention to detail. Under stress, she flies over to I just got to get this done. And she's very logical and very detailed. And probably the best hire I ever made was based on that consultant's recommendation.
What's your secondary? And you say under stress. So when you get your disc results, you'll have your primary behavior, which for you is a D, for me is an I.
Okay.
What's your secondary?
My secondary behavior is S. Yeah, I actually go to logical. This is my mechanical engineering upbringing. This is where I'm really all over the board.
So interesting. I go to C, and that is the rarest combination of all the combinations. So I'm an I. So I tend to like big picture. I speak in generalities. I do like to be liked. I like to build relationships, blah, blah, blah. Under pressure, I suddenly make to-do lists, and I start checking them off.
Yeah. I found this about myself, too. I've been through a number of personality tests, and so this is probably...
Behavioral assessment.
Sorry, behavioral assessments. And they haven't always been enlightening, if you will, but they've been enlightening. So twice in my corporate career, I had to go to the corporate shrink.
You got in trouble?
And I got in trouble, and I had to go on the couch. And I had to go to...
Gee, that really surprises me, Chris.
I'm sure everybody's shocked, but yeah. I had to go, and I love telling the story. So the behavioral consultant that they used was a company called Sperduto. So I got Sperdutoed. And let me tell you how Sperduto goes. So you have to fill out a brief survey of what inspires you, what motivates you. And it's not questions and answers. It's a little bit more relatable stuff. And then you have to go meet with the shrink. And so I went in there, and literally there was a couch, and I sat in the chair because I wouldn't sit in the couch because I wasn't going to be put down like that. I mean, put down not like, but I meant like put down like killed. But I'm talking about, I thought they were going to shoot me. So when I say put down, don't like put me down because I'm not a good person. I thought they were literally going to put me down for life.
Yeah.
So I came in. I'm like,
society would be better without this man.
I guess I'm here, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm working in the bank, and they said, well, Chris, you have a lot of unique qualities. And that's how we started. You have a lot of unique qualities. I still have the notes I took as I was writing, as he was talking to me, is that perhaps I didn't look like every other Southern banker out there, and perhaps I was having a tough time fitting into the mold that was the corporate culture of you do this, we are an army, we move together. No, you cannot have an original thought. Please do not have that original thought. Put that original thought away. You got to go over here and do this. And at the end of it, I went, I hear you. I'm trying. And he looked at me and says, I know you are, and I know that's not who you are. And that was my first sign where I just got somebody just asked me this question on another podcast. What would you go tell your younger self? Get out earlier. I should have left and went out there and charted my path out of the zoo and into the entrepreneurial wild way earlier, because that was my first Sperduto encounter. And then there was another one. And that was because of an incident where I told somebody in a meeting I didn't exactly agree with them in a rather boisterous way.
Well, my guess is you unleashed your inner D at that meeting. There probably are people listening who think this is a bunch of psychobabble. And I minored in psychology, and so I tend to find this very interesting. But I wasn't a true believer of any of this until, and this story is going to blow your mind, I think. You play golf, right?
I do.
So I was struggling with my swing. And there was a guy that I met who was a golf pro who just seemed like one of those old school guys that probably had a bottle of scotch in his bag. And I thought, that's what I need. I don't want the latest and greatest. I want old school teaching. And I couldn't have been further from the truth in my assessment, because the first thing he did was he made me take a test. And it was one of these. It wasn't a disc, and it wasn't the Myers-Briggs. But it was a series of questions that had nothing to do with sports, golf, or anything athletic. It was a question that had one answer or the other, and they were both extremes. Do you beat your kids nightly, or do you give them all the candy that they want? It was that kind of question. And there were 20 of them, and I'm texting him going, this test is ridiculous. I don't know I couldn't believe it. And he's like, just bear with me, just make the best choice you can all the way through. And when the report came back, based on those questions, it said, you probably fly cast. You know what that is in golf, right?
Yeah.
You release it a little too early. It had all my swing flaws. It was 100% exact. And he goes, based on this test and based on the results, I now know, because he goes, there's 10 different ways to fix a swing flaw. He goes, but I now know your psychology, your personality, your behaviors enough to know the best way to approach fixing your swing.
I need to meet that guy, because I think I'll blow his mind. It wouldn't be just one swing flaw. I think I have all 10 of them. But yes.
So can we quickly talk about how you use it in sales? Because you can't give your customers, hey, before I come to an estimate, let me give you this quiz. Do you beat your children, or do you give them candy?
Right. It is. I love this part. So I probably am going to get the guy who helps me today with my disc profile to come on if he'll give us the time with the disc
you were
profile.
wrong about this, Alan.
Yeah. No. His name is Jim Ryerson. I'll tag him in this one. Jim and I have talked. He's a great sales coach. Consults with a lot of the big franchises in our own sales process. I wrote a book called The First 100 Days of In-Home Selling, which is a great book. And it takes it and it basically puts your customers in those 4 quadrants, but it also gives you the telltale signs to look for your customer to identify them, and says, always lead with open-ended questions. So now we're talking about sales. So we're not talking about how we manage our business now. Now, how do you go empower your sales guys? I had my guys read the first 100 days of in-home selling, and I started introducing the disc profile. And with my estimators, my sales guys, it literally takes them almost a year to really get this under their belt. Because it's pretty, as you said, psychobabble stuff. It's pretty heady stuff that we're talking about.
But we can simplify it a little bit for the purposes of this.
So
right?
let's simplify it.
Yeah.
So when you walk in, so we do that. We do ring the doorbell, knock, knock. I am, you are. How's it going today? What are we looking at? You'll know right then if they're extroverted or introverted. Let's eliminate right now. Because if they're introverted, and believe it or not, some of them can actually talk a whole lot because they're really uncomfortable. If they're extroverted, they're going to start letting you know right now, Either I'm super logical and I need to drive this conversation, or I just want to know how much and when and get the hell out of my house.
Right. Somebody's going to offer you a cup of coffee.
Right. That's Gary Go-Go. Hey, it's early in the day. You want to pop? Hey, you need a bottle of water? He's the, hey, buddy, how's it going? Hey, wait, hang on. I'm just finishing up this call. Hey, man, good to see you. Hey, Red. Is that Bulldog Red for Georgia Bulldogs? No, right. It's Bulldog Red. No, it's the trusted tool. So, hey, yeah. So he's your buddy. He just wants to know how much and when. And so we teach these guys on how to work with that guy. The high driver, he has got to win. Right? Yep. So you can't, he's going to come in and go, you know what, I could have done this stuff before, but now, the old lady wants me to have somebody else do it. So I know you just got to do this. Probably take you a couple, 2, 5, maybe 7 minutes. So, whatever that is, maybe 10 minutes. Oh, you tell me how much that is, but yeah, I could have done that too. And you probably use a piece of poplar to fix that up. Yeah.
Yeah. He's going to respect confidence, assertion.
Right. So we teach that is that when you run into Storm and Norman, who's telling you how to do it, you have to punch him back in the nose a little bit, let him know that you're right with him. Mm-hmm. And for me, that's easy because he's in my quadrant. I can roll with these guys all day long. I mean, I have, as we say in business, I have the gravitas of being the owner. I have the gravitas of being a D.
Nice word.
Thank you. Yeah. Big word.
Well, that's a big word. Anyway.
Might be an SCT. Yeah. It's the introverted people that I learned through the disc profile that I was scaring the absolute hell out of. I would walk in and I kept my same style and I would go meet Hal and Amy Amiable and I would be sitting there and they're just like, just tell me how much and when. Just tell me how much and when.
Well, and I've also noticed with those people, they'll just sit there and nod their head, but they're not actually making a decision, or it might be no. And you think, hey, I think this is going well. And
I just keep going. Yeah. And I start telling them all the things we can do in their house. I start telling them how good I am, and I'm really animated in the beginning. And I'm doing this. And then after I went to the disc profile and really started digging into it, I realized there's this one lady. I look back on it now, and she had the southern apron on with the really frilly stuff and the flowers and the prim and proper dress. And she had her hair all done with 25 cans of Aquanet up there. And it was just her, and her husband was at work. And I thought I was making this awesome connection with her, Alan. I thought, and, we were talking through everything through her house, and she is Southern Belle. And I clearly, if you're listening to my voice, I'm not a Southern man.
Bless your heart.
Right. And I'm doing this. I'm thinking, man, I am nailing this. And I lost it.
Yeah.
I lost the job. I'm like, man, what the hell happened? And so I went through the disc profile. And I had the disc consultant start after me. I mean, literally, I think the lady thought I was going to eat her. I mean, she was like, can this big, fiery Italian get out of my house now? Because you are scaring me. And here I thought, she loved me. Yeah. I had my hands going out like this. I was all animated. And so I've had to learn with them, you ask the question and you just sit back and you listen. Because they got to tell you more. They're either really super logical or they just want to hear what's going on, and then they'll make the assessment. But they're not going to tell you today. And if you make me make a decision today, Mr. One Call Close Home Services person, gone.
Yep. And then your C is probably going to want complete transparency, itemize, bullet point, no fluff.
So this is the person when you show up at the door, she has her list. She has printed out from the internet the appropriate way to fix her list. She has picked out some products, already has some pictures on her phones, knows exactly what she wants, and has 4 copies. 1 for you and 3 for the other 3 bids she's about to get. Right. And she is going to analyze this. And there is nothing you can do today to make her decide today. So we use that all the time. So the high D, they got to win. The extrovert, they got to like you. But you also got to prove to them you know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And then with the introverted, quieter person, just tell me how much and when, and then I'll make an informed decision on my own. But if you keep telling me everything you're doing, you're just invaded my space, and you're making me very uncomfortable. And then that super logical person, and we've all been there, they ask just those 5 more questions when you're walking back out, or they're the person who asks you that 1 more question on that conference call. You're like, oh my God, lady, you're like nails on a chalkboard, which we don't have chalkboards anymore, so who knows what those are. But just think of the most grating sound. You're like, really? You want 1 more question about which nail I'm going to use? Okay. And if you don't answer that last one, you may lose it.
And they're going to read every paragraph in the contract.
Yep. Every paragraph in the contract. So in our 4 quadrants, in D, I, S, and C, which one do you think for me in 13 years, which one do I actually lose more money and have less unhappy? I have the most unhappiest customers and I lose the most money with.
As a customer?
Which customer do I have the toughest time with?
So
you have your Storm and Normandy.
Your steadies are going to be, I think, your silent killers. Because if they're unhappy, they're not going to tell you about it.
Right.
They're just going to mention it to everybody. Eyes tend to not be very detail-oriented, so I can't imagine they would critique too much.
Right. They're our best.
Yep. I'm going to say it's the C's who are probably behind looking at every little grout line. And am I right?
So the one that we immediately lose the most money on are the D's. Because you send them back the estimate. They looked at it, but they're smarter than you. And they say, I know I told you that we were also going to replace this, this, and this, but it's nowhere on the contract. And they know it's not on the contract because they are hard driving, but they'll use it to their advantage and try to bully you out of it. And they will ask for it, and they will ask for the discount right away. But you're right. The ones we end up losing the most money with are the ones who say, he was a nice guy, but...
Back to the nice guy, but...
He's the nice guy, but... And I want you to come back out. And you realize that they really nitpicked and got into it.
Yeah, there was a scratch here and there.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and if you're listening to this podcast, who are these people? I keep picking on accountants. I'll tell you something.
I married one, and I still, it's true.
There you go. Nailed it.
She's a wonderful woman, but it's true.
The other ones that are tough are also photographers. Because they have to look at every little detail of every little screen, of every little pixel, make sure it looks perfect. And they like to sit in that, back in the day was the dark room, today it's their computers. It is also today that computer programmer that sits there and does nothing but coding all day long. But he has to be precise. She has to nail it. She has to compile and have a great program. And if you don't do precisely the work that was supposed to be done per the contract, they're going to call you back and say, how come that wasn't done? I want a discount. In a nice way, because he was a nice guy, bud. All right, so to wrap up the disc profile, and then we're going to roll into the next season. Hopefully you got a little bit of something out of this. I think this was a practical, great discussion around discs, not only how to manage to it, but also to work with your customers. Go out there and check out the homeserviceinstitute.com because I didn't have a chance to pitch that a little bit, because we can also help you with interpreting disc profiles with the consulting service that we have.
Mailbag.
So don't forget, Chris at thetrustedtoolbox.com for any mailbag items. There's other items or topics you want us to talk about. That's Chris at thetrustedtoolbox.com. Just in case you didn't know, it's not Cars for Kids. It's Chris at thetrustedtoolbox.com. Make it a great day, everybody.
See ya.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Small Business Safari. Remember, your positive attitude will help you achieve that higher altitude you're looking for in the wild world of small business ownership. And until next time, make it a great day.